on today's StoryBeat.
So I was in a bit of a rut around 40, midlife crisis, been there, done that. And then I did some MDMA and went to a rave and everything changed. It was fantastic. It was a great experience. It's great for creativity because it makes your brain work in different ways. I think a lot of people get stuck in ruts with the way they think. I think that's what anxiety and depression is. You just get stuck in this mode of thinking and you can't break out of it. That's why psychedelics are now being used for depression and anxiety, because they really do break you out of that. They change your mind.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Jimi Fritz, is a filmmaker, musician, writer, entrepreneur, raconteur, and roustabout. He's written 2 feature-length screenplays, numerous articles, and a non-fiction book about rave culture. He's also made numerous films and music videos. His latest book, The End of Everything, an ironic black comedy, is about an older man simply named Fritz, who spends his days in a psychiatric institution plotting his own suicide while contending with the extraordinary insanity all around him. I've read The End of Everything and can tell you this is one of the most unique stories I've ever had the pleasure to peruse. Deeply intellectual, smartly psychological, and wildly hilarious, The End of Everything had me turning pages and wanting neither the story nor Fritz to end. If you like darkly comic storytelling, I highly urge you to read it. Previously, Jimi published Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, which is a psychedelic travelogue and memoir. Jimi takes his readers on a journey both geographical and philosophical while sharing a half-century of adventures in buying, selling, and consuming psychedelic drugs. Along the way, we learn the difference between smart drugs and dumb drugs, the truth about religion, and how to make a perfect cup of tea. Jimi Fritz professes to be a heterodoxical polemicist, a skeptical polymath, an iconoclastic anti-theist, and an aficionado of Stoicism. So for all those reasons and many more, it's my great honor and privilege to welcome the truly brilliant creative force known as Jimi Fritz to StoryBeat today. Jimi, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. That's a hell of an intro. Thank you.
It is. That last bit there was a little hard to get out. It's like a lot of words, big words.
I know. A lot of people have had trouble with that. Another podcast I did, there's a woman pronounce almost every single word wrong.
Did I get them right?
It was hilarious. You got them right, yeah. But it was funny.
So I win today's bingo.
Yes.
Okay, so how old were you when you began all this creativity?
I think I've always been creative. As a teenager, I wrote poems, and then I picked up the guitar at 17 and was writing songs. And I've always had something, and I've always kind of been cross-platform kind of creative. I've done music and film and theater and writing, of course, photography. Lots of different areas. I like to switch it up a bit.
Why do you like to switch it up? What does that do for you?
It just puts you in a different mode, so you don't just get in a rut, with a medium. I think if you're an artist, you can create with any medium, and if you're a musician, you can create something with any musical instrument.
I think that's probably accurate. Some people, of course, devote an entire lifetime to one discipline or another. You're multidisciplinarian.
Yeah.
And it's because I assume you like them all. You enjoy doing them.
Exactly. And they all sort of have a different, use a different part of your brain and have different rewards. So it's nice to switch things up. And also some like filmmaking, for instance, is very expensive. So I was making films for a while and then kind of gave it up for a while because it's too much, it's too expensive.
Oh, it is expensive.
It's too time consuming. You need 100 people. So it's writing a book it was a breath of fresh air after that, because you just sit down and it's just you and the page. That's it. You can do anything you want.
It's about the least expensive creative act you can do.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's really nothing you can't, no place you can't go, nobody you can't meet, nobody things you can't do. So it's just wide open. I found a lot of freedom in writing for that reason.
Is there any part of what you do that isn't in some way, shape, or form storytelling?
Yeah, I think it's all storytelling.
It's all storytelling.
It's all communicating anyway. I think for me, that's the number one impetus is you have to have something to say.
Hmm.
I don't want to write songs about nothing. I don't want to write, pop songs, and I don't want to write books that are just stories about characters. I want to have something to say. So if I have something to say, then I find it, fairly easy to just pursue that and to just keep going until it's done.
Do you think of yourself primarily as one of those disciplines or another, as a writer or a musician or something, or do you just think it's one ball of wax?
It's all one thing to me. Yeah, more or less. I mean, right now I've just spent 4 hours editing a 28-minute art film, which goes along with my 28-minute piece of music that I just finished a couple of weeks ago. So right now I'm a musician and filmmaker. So whatever I'm doing is what I am, I guess.
At the same time, you're still being and telling stories. You're being a storyteller.
Exactly. And, writing a song or writing a poem or writing a book or something, it's all just working with language. And so you have to have a love of language and an aptitude for it. And then, like I say, you got to have something to say. You got to have something that you want to communicate, whether it's, song or whatever the form is.
And even music, pure music with no words to it, even that's a language of a kind.
It is, yeah, very much so. And editing is a language too.
Sure, of course.
Editing is very much it. I just saw an interview with Ron Frick, the guy that did Pow Anasatsky and Koi Anasatsky,
Okay.
that trilogy. He was interesting because he was talking about a visual language that he invented for those films. And I just watched an interview with him, and I'm sort of doing the same thing right now because I've got this 28-minute collage or pastiche of black and white and different tinted images, which are all kind of layering on top of each other. And I'm just kind of creating a different kind of language for each section. So I really related to that.
Is it got a story in it? Is it easy to tell, or is it something you have to absorb?
Well, there's lyrics, so there's lots of sections. It's basically me looking back on my life. It's called No Regrets. So it's me looking back and reflecting and paying homage to my influences and heroes. It's talking about the absurdity of life and, some philosophical concepts.
Who are your heroes? Who did inspire you?
I just made a huge list. I don't have it with me, but I don't know. Writers, I really like Dostoevsky. I like the classics. I'm into 19th century literature. So this last book I wrote, which is called The End of Everything, it was kind of an homage to 19th century Russian literature, because they're all like deeply psychological characters. They all have layers and layers of going on, which is, the author, right? So when you read Dostoevsky, you're inside Dostoevsky's head and you know what he thinks. If you read Vonnegut, you know exactly what Vonnegut thinks. If you read Bukowski, you know exactly what Bukowski thinks because you have that vicarious experience of their life. And that's why I say that writing is about the writing. It's not really about the stories or the characters. It's about the language. And when you get a direct connection with that language, you have a direct connection with the author.
You have got to be a voracious reader and learner. Am I right?
I have read a lot, yeah.
I mean, when you read The End of Everything, it's clearly evident that whoever wrote this, that this person is a deep reader. You've read a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's how I learned to write.
You didn't go to school for it?
No, I'm a grade 9 dropout.
A grade 9 dropout?
Well, maybe last year I didn't go much.
So everything that you've done in your life creatively has been just by doing it?
Yes.
Absorbing what others have done and then
Right.
doing your own thing with that information?
Yeah, I mean, I learned to make films by watching films. I learned to write books by reading books. I learned to write songs by listening to songs and how they're constructed.
And you're also a musician. Did you learn to play instruments without any training?
Yeah,
Just by playing?
just by watching people.
That's
I
fascinating.
used to just go to coffee houses, in the early 70s, late 60s, and just watch people play and watch what they were doing and memorized it and then went home and did it.
So you've said a couple of times now that, you have to have something to say. What I read in The End of Everything is that you are a seeker of truth.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I'm a valuer of truth. I value the truth. It's more important to me than a lot of things, for sure.
Hmm. And so going back to your very beginning, and then we'll move off of this, but I'm just still curious, back to your very beginning, did you know early on in life that the truth was going to be important to you, that you were going to value it back then, or did you learn that for yourself much later?
I don't remember it being a kind of a decision or a direction that I chose to go in. It was just I was inspired. I mean, I think it was when I first started reading literature, first started reading, Hermann Hesse and Heinrich Boll and the existentialists and then I was just inspired by that stuff, and that's what set me on my path.
And you tend to gravitate toward deep thinking books, not fluffy stuff.
No, no, zero fluffy stuff. No, no fluff. No romance novels. No pop music. I detest pop music. Not just because, I mean, if people want to listen to pop music, fine. If you want to read a Harlequin romance, go ahead. I don't care. But the problem is it infects the market, if you want, and people think that that's the real thing, right? People don't know what art is anymore. They don't know what art is in a painting. You put any splashes of paint on a canvas and put it on the wall, and people think it's art. It's not.
Do you think that at one time people did know that?
Yeah, I think they were much more savvy in late 1800s and into the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. I think people were far more savvy as to what art was, because there was only real art. There was only real painters and real musicians and real writers and real poets. And now it's all imitation stuff. People are just making stuff that's like that. And so you look at it, and if you don't know the difference, because you don't understand that art is a process and not a product, then you miss that completely. And I think we've got a whole generation, last two generations, I don't think they know what art is. I don't think they've ever really figured it out.
What do you think caused us to go there? What do you think happened?
The market just got swamped with pablum. It just got swamped with stuff that people were trying to make money with, or stuff that they thought, they were trying to reproduce an end product, something that they thought would be, marketable or something.
So it's about money then, ultimately.
I guess in some ways, although, I don't know if there's much money in books anymore, but.
Well, there isn't much money in books anymore,
No.
But there's still money in other forms. There's still money in commercial narrative filmmaking, and that's why people go to Hollywood still.
Right.
And TV and so on. Books, not so much anymore. It's really hard to make any kind of a living there unless you are one of a tiny handful of huge names, mostly writing fluff that you don't read.
Yeah, exactly. All the most popular authors I probably would never read. The Dan Browns and the Michael Crichtons and all the most successful, Stephen King, all the most successful writers have no interest whatsoever.
Have you ever read any of them?
Yeah, I've read enough to know that, I've listened to enough pop music to know that I don't like it.
Got it.
For instance, Taylor Swift is, this huge sensation, I thought, okay, I'll give her a listen. She must have something going on, right? Because she's so incredibly popular, a billionaire now. And so I downloaded the Eras tour, and I watched it. And I thought it was the same vacuous, pointless pop songs that have been written for the last 40 years and really had no redeeming feature whatsoever. I was shocked that somebody with, so little, so derivative a talent could be so popular. But I guess it's because all the millennials and these young girls that buy our records, there was 13 to 18-year-old girls basically as a market. And they really don't understand anything about art or music or culture at all.
I think it's very challenging for anyone under the age of 20 today because of cell phones and computers and so on. I think it's very, very challenging for any of them to understand what else is out there in the world, except, as you say, TikTok.
Yeah, no, it's a disaster. Social media is a disaster for teenagers right now, and it's a disaster for art and culture. What I'm seeing now is the death of art and culture everywhere I look. Everywhere you look, it's getting watered down, diluted, and just subjugated, at every turn.
Do you have a thought as to where this is going to take us and where we're going to wind up?
To hell in a handbasket. Without the handbasket.
I guess I'll meet you there.
Yeah, no, I don't see it turning around. I don't see there being a new, renaissance of true creative, artistic integrity flourishing in the world. I don't see that. I mean, there'll always be underground pockets and stuff, and I guess that will always be, but they won't have any avenues. They won't be able to get their stuff out. I mean, you put something on the internet now, and it's, there's a billion other things just like it. It's like getting noticed on the internet is virtually impossible now.
Well, that's it. It has become just a great big giant sea of everything, and it's very hard to discern what it is that you should spend any time on. And more importantly, it's really pretty challenging for someone to actually rise above that. And when they do, like you say, a Taylor Swift or someone like that, how does that person rise above all that other flotsam and jetsam that's out there? How do they do that?
They get a billion teenagers to click on their subscribe and like, and that makes huge connections, and they go viral, and they're the biggest thing in the world. But that's not because of the work. It's not because of the talent.
So all these different disciplines that you have, do you do all of them regularly, or do you spend time on one kind of thing at a time? Do you spend time just as a filmmaker, just as a writer, just as an artist, just as a musician, or do you try to do all of them regularly?
No, I kind of switch backwards and forwards. So like earlier this year, I started writing this piece of music, which was this 28-minute piece. And that was, that was full time. I was just doing that. So I was writing pieces in between recording, and then recording some more, and then writing some more, and just kept going like that until the music was finished. And then when the music was finished, I said, okay, I'm going to make a film with this. So then I started shooting and collecting footage, and started working on that. And I've been doing that, every week for the last couple of months.
What kind of camera are you shooting on?
I shoot on anything and everything. Like I have a guy that I hired for the main shoot, and we went out and we got a lot of the footage, and he uses a super high-end digital camera. It's not film. It's a good image, but the thing is, it doesn't matter how I capture an image, because I mess it up anyways. And I can turn the contrast up to 110, and then I fill it full of film noise, and then I put film filters over it, and you can barely tell what's going on. So really, the original capture of the image is less important. I mean, if you're making some, like a feature film or something, it's a different thing. But this is more like a painting.
So this is not a narrative film then?
The songs are somewhat narrative, so they do fall, and the images are cut to the music.
Got it. You're making impressions then?
Yeah.
Of one kind or another?
That's right.
And you're doing it both sonically and visually?
Yes.
Do you employ actors, or is it just random stuff on the street, or how do you do it?
I have done. I've on my website, jimifritz.ca, I have 24 music videos that I made of my original songs. And those are more or less live recordings in different locations. So yeah, I get a couple of camera people. We'd have up to 5 or 7 cameras going. And then we just perform the song 3 times to use the best take, and then cut it together. This new project is a little bit different. I'm using clips of my other videos in it, slowed down and messed up and played backwards and God knows what. But it's a different kind of project.
Well, you clearly are working with technology. And so where did you just learn this technology by just playing around with it?
Well, when I edit, I work with an editor. I mean, I know how the editing works. I started off making films on like Super 8. So I was cutting the film physically with a razor blade.
Yes.
And then I moved to 16 mil, and then I moved into video, because I worked with a TV station for a while. And we were shooting 3/4-inch U-matic video to these giant cassettes, like a small suitcase-sized cassette that you ram into this giant machine that's 40 pounds hanging off your shoulder. And then you've got your battery pack and a battery belt, and it's like ridiculous amount of equipment, and it gives you a really shitty image. So that was an early video, right? And then we're shooting Betacam, and then it went Betacam SP, and then Betacam digital, and now it's all pretty much digital. But like I say, that's just the image capture. I never use an image exactly as it's captured. I always mess with it, and I turn up the the noise and the gain and the contrast, and color it and tint it, and turn it inside out, and I just mess with everything.
So you take whatever product you get in its raw form and play with that. It doesn't matter what that raw form is.
Doesn't matter. No, not really. I mean, some of this stuff I shot on iPhone. I'd have an idea for a shot. I could go out with my iPhone and set it up in a tripod and then do a walkthrough or do something with it. And then that's all in the video too. But you'd never know what was shot with an iPhone and what was shot with a 4K digital camera. You'd never be able to tell the difference.
So I'm curious, where's your market for this? Who would you want to see this?
There is no market for this. I'd like the whole world to see it, but people sitting through a 28-minute music video, I know that they're probably not going to do it. So, I've resigned myself to the fact that I create now for myself. I mean, I always have, I've always done it to satisfy myself. And if I can satisfy myself and I'm pleased with it, then for me, it's all about the process of doing it. Once I've finished it, if you want to sit through it, great. And if you don't, I don't care.
Do you then leave your work from the past behind? You never look at it again?
Very rarely. Yeah, very rarely. I haven't read any of my books since I finished them. I thought I might read the end of everything, or maybe Confessions at some time, But yeah, no, I don't go back and look at stuff because it's done.
The listeners who know nothing about your books or your work, let's tell them a little about the end of everything. Pitch the story so that the listeners know what the book is about.
So it's about a character called Fritz who's in a mental asylum in a non-specific time and place, and he's plotting his own suicide. He's decided that he's never going to get out of the institution. He battles with a psychiatrist, and there's some other wacky characters in there that he has dueling with. And there's basically a book written because I wanted to rant about stuff. I wanted to rant about education and the death of art and culture and politics and all these things. And I wanted a vehicle to do that. So I said, okay, there's a guy sitting at a typewriter and he's banging away in the mental asylum. And that's me, but it's the character. And he's just ranting about it. It just gave me full freedom to just rant about all the things that I rant about anyways.
Have you ever been in an institution?
No.
So this is completely out of your imagination.
Yeah, the situation is for sure.
When you say it, you're absolutely right. It's loosely based on classic literature.
Yeah, the style of writing is sort of with that in mind anyway. It's kind of updated and modernized and personalized, but it's an homage to that.
I think Fritz may be the single, I'll use this word carefully, smartest, highest intelligence, highest IQ character I may have ever read.
Really? Great.
He's super brilliant and very much in his own head.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole book is told in the first person and it's all in his head.
Right.
And so frankly, you don't know as you're going along whether he's imagining what he's telling us
Exactly.
or whether it's real. So it's like a dream within a dream within a dream.
Yeah.
And yet you present it in a very realistic way. So it doesn't feel dream-like, but yet at the same time, it feels dream-like.
Yeah. And I guess the thing for the reader is you got to figure out, is he really as smart as he thinks he is? Is he really as sick as he thinks he is? Is he really as crazy as he thinks he is? And so those are the questions that keep coming up.
You ask yourself as you're reading it, is he actually in an institution? Is he maybe just imagining all this sitting in his house somewhere out in the middle of nowhere? It's very hard to tell, but yet it's so compelling that it's like popcorn. Now there's a fluff reference, but yet it is. You just keep wanting to read more and more and more. It's compelling. It's really compelling. And you also then at the same time give us all this massive amount of information about drugs, about the world, and it's all very detailed.
Right.
You had to have done a lot of your own research on all this.
Yeah. Well, it's called living a life. My whole life has been research for this.
Well, it's all there. So he is then a reflection of you in a way.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think everything that an artist does is if it's honest and authentic, and then it's got to be autobiographical, right? I think all art, all real art is autobiographical. it's always about the artist. It's always about the mind of the writer and the mind of the filmmaker.
I think that's true.
That's what makes it unique and authentic, because we are all unique and authentic. And if you reflect that through your art, then that's what you get.
It's a little tricky when you get into a highly collaborative form of art, like movie making, like plays, etc., where there might be a writer, a director, actors, etc., and there are many collaborators with their hands in the pie.
Yeah, some areas are more collaborative than others. I mean, everything I've ever made, I've been the producer, director, and writer. So I call the shots. It's always my show, right? I'm not interested in I'm not very interested in collaboration with other artists, because I just know what I like and I know what I want, and I'd have to work around what they like and what they want. And to me, that's not an advantage.
Same thing as a musician with groups of people that you may play with?
Yeah, well, that again, it's my song, right? I've written the song, I play the song, and they play along with me. They follow behind. If they say, no, I want to change this verse, they're not going to be able to do that because I like that verse, because I wrote that verse. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of collaborating for that reason, because I just kind of know what I want and know what I like. And I'm doing these things because I want to do what I want to do.
So you have to work with people who are willing to subjugate their ego into yours during that process.
Absolutely, yes. And if you pay somebody, I use an editor, right? So sitting with this guy today for 4 hours, and he's brilliant on this machine, right? He just like bang, bang, bang. Like I say, okay, do this and flip it, mirror image, flush it yellow, and then make this other image sepia and superimpose it. And by the time I finish saying it, he's done it.
Wow.
It's incredible. So for me to learn that level of technique would take years and years and years. And that's not my area of expertise. I don't want to come up with the ideas and the visualizations and then have somebody. It's like when I'm recording, I'm not doing all the recording and EQing and compressing everything and all that. I have a recording engineer, and he knows what I like, and we've worked together a lot in the past. And so it's a great working relationship.
You're the artist with the ideas and the vision, and they are the people who help you interpret it technically.
Yeah, and that's their forte too. So, some people are technicians, some people are artists, some people are both. It's more rare, but I think the type of skills that you need for, this deep technology, when you got a million menus and sub menus and blah, 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 and all these different things you can do. And I can't even keep track of it. I can't even see when he's doing stuff on the screen. There's so much stuff going on that I can barely even see it. And I have reading glasses, I should be able to see 20/20. And he's sitting back and he's got a million things on the screen. I think, how can you even see that? So yeah, so I do need people to. I guess that's a collaboration.
Well, that is a collaboration. What do you think makes that work? It's not just the fact that you're paying him. What makes the collaboration work?
Well, firstly, that I know what I want, and they know how to give it to me. So that works. And I take suggestions. I'm happy to, if somebody's got a suggestion and it's going to make something better, then I'm all for it. I'm not gonna say no because it's not my idea. So there's a certain level of collaboration there for sure.
All right, so I want to go back to Fritz for half a second, because you're making me think of Fritz as we're talking, and he wants to commit suicide. Where did that idea come from? Why that?
Well, because that's my plan. I've always planned to take my own death into my own hands. I've always thought that was. I'm not going to go do the deterioration at the end of life, and suddenly get more and more decrepit and more pathetic, and then have be a burden on everybody around me. I was intended to commit suicide at some point, not yet.
Not tonight, I hope.
Not tonight, not soon, but when the time comes, I'm prepared to do it. And so I researched that. I researched the right to die people, and I researched the way, all the ways that people do it and the best ways to do it. And so I figured out my method. And in fact, just a couple of months ago, I have a friend who's 92, and he decided that he was going to, because we got made. Where are you? You're in
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Because I'm up in Vancouver, BC. We got made, medical assistant dying. So he wanted to get made and get somebody to take him out. And I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go. I have this beautiful gazebo in my backyard, and it's all lit up with fairy lights and stuff. I said, whenever little parties there every Friday night. And so I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a party. All my friends are going to come over. We're going to have a great time. And then in the morning, the doctor's going to come over. I'm going to lay out on that bench right there. And the doctor's going to shoot me up and I'll be gone. And he said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I think I'd like to do that. So I said, okay. And then about a month later, he did it. And we had a great party. The doctor came over in the morning and took him out. And then we had a good old Irish wake, and we drank Irish whiskey and partied with the body for a couple of hours.
Wow.
And then took him off. And that was that. It was a very positive experience.
You are the first person I've ever spoken to who is expressing it this way. I've never heard anyone say this before. I've read things about it, but I've never spoken to a human that's said this.
I think you're going to hear a lot more about it in the near future.
Why?
Well, just because it's becoming more and more. I mean, the amount of people that, when I went to pick him up from the old people's home for the last time he was coming over, there was a woman in the elevator, and we said, yeah, we're just going over. Peter is going to commit suicide tonight. It's got made. She says, oh, yes, I'm going to do that. I said, oh, really? I was surprised. But
do you think that that's a function of the true fact that humans, up until only very recently in our history, have basically died much younger than we are now dying? We're living much longer than we used to in our past.
Sometimes too long, People are hanging on to the last minute, and they have horrible lives. I mean, we have another friend who was in a dementia home for a while. And, these people are just sitting around in wheelchairs staring into space. And sometimes they last for years like that. Mm-hmm. It's just horrible, horrible existence. I don't think anybody would choose that if they were given the choice. So now in Canada, luckily, we have assisted suicide, mm-hmm. and it's legal and anybody can get it. And I think it's a great thing.
And Fritz goes around gathering medicine, drugs, in order to do this act, to commit his own suicide.
Right.
And you then have spent a lot of time studying what those drugs would be, yes?
Yeah. Well, you can look at it. There's certain organizations around the world. There's Dignitas in Switzerland, and there's some in Amsterdam. The Right to Die people in Canada have one method, and the Right to Die people in the States do another method. So all these things have been tried and worked out, and there are foolproof methods,
no doubt,
and they're actually not, they're not terrible, they're not horrible. There was a woman on Vancouver Island who was one of the early pioneers of this, and she took out about 300 people before she got arrested, and she went to court, and she got off eventually, but what she was doing was nitrous oxide. So you get a tank, you put the mask on, and then she would set it up for them. And then she'd just sit on the other side of the room, so she wasn't actively involved in the act. They would turn it on themselves. And she said she watched almost 300 people die like that.
Wow.
She said they died quickly, they died peacefully, and they died a lot of times with a smile on their face, because it's hypoxia. Hypoxia is the best way to go. You do some benzos, and then hypoxia and a little bit of sodium chloride to stop the heart.
I love how you've shortchanged benzos.
Yeah.
If I'm reading your bio right, you have spent a lot of time in various psychotropic drugs. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I tell that story in Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer by Jimi Fritz.
Right.
Available in fine bookstores everywhere. And it's basically my experiences traveling, because I've done a lot of traveling in a lot of different countries, and also a lot of different psychedelic experiences. So it's bringing those two things together and talking about my different experiences in different places with different drugs.
And you've never been incarcerated for any of those activities?
No.
That's pretty awesome.
I've always kind of stayed under the radar, because I always done it privately and, with close friends and stuff. I've never been selling joints down at the school or anything.
What is it? I've never even come close to doing anything that's a psychotropic drug, so I don't have that experience in my life. What does that do for you on your day-to-day life? What does that do for you in your creative life?
It's great for creativity because it makes your brain work in different ways. I think a lot of people get stuck. A lot of people get stuck in ruts with the way they think. I think that's what anxiety and depression is. You just get stuck in this mode of thinking and you can't break out of it. That's why psychedelics are now being used for depression and anxiety, because they really do break you out of that. They change your mind. And so that's a really valuable thing to do. Most people don't know how to do that. With the psychedelic, it gets you there in 40 minutes.
It gets you there in 40 minutes. And does it require smart usage so that you don't hurt yourself in some way?
Yeah, exactly. You need to know the dosage. You need to know what the drug is and why you're using it and where you're using it. Leary was famous for settings, so the frame of mind and your environment. Like, you don't do 2 hits of acid and go see a horror movie. This is irresponsible drug use.
And that's what you mean by being an ethical drug dealer then?
Yeah, so I've always sourced the highest quality psychedelics and sold them to close friends and people that I trust, and just so that everybody can have that, that safety.
Have you tried to write or make movies or make music while you're on a psychedelic drug?
Not really, no. I'm not. It's not really conducive to. It's conducive to thinking and getting inspired and getting ideas, but actually, like playing an instrument, and it depends on the dosage, right? Like with LSD, if you do a quarter of a hit, you do 25 mics, and it's just like a nice, pleasant feeling, and that can, you can play music on that. But if you do anything over 100 mics, then you're getting into, you might not be able to play your instrument anymore, but you got to think about it and get inspired. And then you bring that, it's like integrative therapy. That's what the psychedelic therapy does. They give you the experience and then they do the therapy afterwards. So with, creatively, you do have the experience, you get inspired, you get your mind blown, and then you come back the next day and you pick up an instrument or pick up a pen.
So once you've gone through an experience, you still have good memory of it when you're past it.
Oh yeah, it changes you for sure.
But you don't forget. It doesn't make you forget. Like people who,
no.
For instance, alcoholics will get to a point where they might black out and they don't remember any of what's going on.
No, it's the opposite with psychedelics. Helps you to remember. It actually makes more neuro connections for the same experience. So it feels new and fresh and exciting and inspiring. It increases your cognition. Yeah.
And you lay all this out in Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer?
Yes. This is the one you'll have to read next.
The Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer by Jimi Fritz. Yes, indeed. It doesn't have a character named Fritz in it, does it?
It does not. Well, it's an autobiography. It's a psychedelic travelogue and memoir. So it's, it's memoir.
Memoir.
It's me in the first person talking about my life. Everything in it is 100% factual and true.
You experienced it all.
I didn't make anything up.
You didn't make anything up. Then what was the book Rave Culture about? Obviously raves, but explain it.
That was the first book. Yeah, I got swept up in rave culture when I was about 40, and a friend introduced me to a friend's son, actually. He came around and he said, oh, there's this thing called rave and this new drug called MDMA and you should try it, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay. So I did some MDMA and went to a rave and it blew my mind. It changed my life. So I was in a bit of a rut around 40, midlife crisis, been there, done that, blah, blah. And what am I going to do next? And what's the point? And then I did some MDMA and went to a rave. And everything changed.
How so?
Came out in the morning and I was like a new person, was invigorated and inspired. It was fantastic. It was a great experience.
Are you able to explain how or why it does that?
It gives you a great feeling of empathy, and not just empathy for other people, but empathy for yourself. And so you just feel really good about yourself. You feel really good about other people. And that's really the whole ball game in terms of, psychological health, right? Any psychologist will tell you that the most important thing for a human being is human connection. and to feel like, feel human connection with other people. So when you get that in a massive dose with yourself and with everybody around you, it's a very powerful experience. It's a real eye-opener.
It's different than LSD then?
MDMA is more of a kind of an emotional-centered drug. It's more of an emotional experience. LSD is very much an intellectual type experience.
So you're feeling on MDMA, but you're thinking on LSD.
Yeah, and you can do them together too. It's called a candy flip. You do half LSD and half MDMA. Then you get the best of both worlds.
It's called a candy flip?
Yeah, candy flip, acid and MDMA. Or there's a hippie flip, which is mushrooms and MDMA.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you got a lot of experimenting to do.
I'm not sure at this point in my life I'm heading down that road, but you never know.
Well, that's what I thought at 40, but surprise, surprise.
Does it actually then impact the art that you do in the days to come after?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's inspiring, it's inspiring and uplifting, and that's the best kind of attitude to create art in.
It makes you want to do more work.
Yeah. You get a lot of ideas, you get a lot of inspiration.
Would you say some of your best work has come out of that?
Well, I'd say my whole life has come out of that, really. It's colored everything I do. Relationships and family and art.
Do you do some form of psychedelic drug almost every day, or is it every week, or how often do you do it?
Right now, I'm mostly just, I'll do a little bit of E on Friday night, maybe. And
E, that would be ecstasy?
Yes, ecstasy or MDMA, same thing.
Okay. Is that also called Molly? Am I correct?
Yeah, Molly, X, roll. There's a lot of different names.
I watch enough bad TV to know what some of those phrases are.
Right. Yeah. So LSD for me now is kind of a special event, go on a hike or something with some friends, or go away for the weekend and we'll do a little bit of LSD on the Sunday, just and go walk in the woods. That's always fun.
What happens? You start to see things very differently.
Yeah, you just experience the world much more vibrantly, much more as a direct experience. Everything is heightened. Everything is exaggerated. So it's very, it's fun.
So I think some people would go through that and not have your capacity to then use it as an expression of art later, that they wouldn't have your intellectual capacity to do it. I assume that informed you a good deal, and when you wrote The End of Everything, that sort of experience is in there as well, yes?
Yeah. No, I think, it affects people. Some people are not creative, some people don't have creative outlets. So it's probably not going to inspire them very much to write a book if they've never done any writing.
You're all creative outlet, all the time.
Well, I'm always thinking about something. I was thinking about doing something. It's interesting. I'm just coming to the end of this film and music project. And I'm starting to think. I say, I'm never going to write another book. And then I find myself thinking about writing a book.
For your films, do you write screenplays for them or not?
I've written 2 feature-length screenplays. I tried to produce them, actually. One of them we got pretty close. And the other one we tried to sell. And again, we got some nibbles and some interest. But no, I don't. There's not much. Very, very difficult to sell a screenplay.
Yes, it is.
Almost more difficult than to sell a book. So
I've only been in that business for 40 years.
Exactly. So, most films are made from existing stories or existing screenplays, or they're commissioned from outlines and treatments. And, it's very, very difficult to break in there.
It certainly is. Well, have you thought about taking The End of Everything and adapting it into a screenplay of some kind?
Well, if somebody wants to pay me to do it, sure, but that's not something that I'm that interested in doing. I think it would make a good limited series.
I agree. I think it would make an excellent limited series.
Like 5 one-hour episodes, and it's the continuing adventures of Fritz in this mental asylum with all the characters coming through, because you could have a lot of different people coming through, different actors.
Are you a people watcher? Do you observe people and their attitudes and the way that they act?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think most writers are observers. They watch people, watch human behaviors, and listen to patterns of speech and stuff like that.
And that too gets heightened on psychedelics.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you're much more perceptive, You see more, you hear more,
Hmm.
think more.
And I'm curious about the performance aspect of your life. You also perform with what, your own band, or do you record music? What do you do with the music world?
I started off playing guitar and hitchhiking around Europe and playing in the street. So I used to play in the cafes, walk through the cafes with the guitar and the harmonica on a brace and play for everybody, and then have somebody, follow me behind me with collecting money. And I made a living like that for a few years, so it was quite successful. Then when I came to North America, it was very hard to make a living playing in the street because nobody gives you any money. so so I quit that, and I was sort of a professional musician for a couple of years in Ontario. I was doing pubs and restaurants and concerts and that, for a while. I don't have a love of performing. I prefer to create in a solitary environment.
What is it about performing you don't like? Is it that it's not creating?
It's because the audience is distracting.
The audience is distracting.
I'm just distracted by an audience. Like if everybody's completely quiet and listening, then I find that really distracting. It breaks my concentration because I'm so aware of all this attention, right? And if they're not listening and they're just drinking in the pub and blah, 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 and talking, then it's really distracting because why am I there? Either way, it doesn't work for me.
That's so interesting because most people who get into that kind of world or life are interested in having people look at them.
Yeah, that's right. No, people that have done well as performers and musicians are people that love to perform, and people that love to get that attention, and then it feeds them, and they get high on it, and then they play better. And it's the exact opposite for me.
Huh.
I play worse.
You play worse.
People are listening. Yeah, I play best when I'm on my own.
Do you then make recordings when you're on your own?
Exactly. That's why I record now. I don't perform anymore. I haven't performed in front of an audience for years.
Well, but you perform on a recording, or does somebody else do it?
Well, I'm in a recording studio.
And do you play instruments beyond just guitar?
Yeah, this new piece I'm working on, I play all the instruments except for there's a friend of mine who plays some bass and another guy that plays some horn. And apart from that, I'm playing everything. I'm playing electric guitar, acoustic guitar, ukulele, and then a lot of stuff on the keyboard. So I'm playing string sections and flute sections and percussion, bit of bass. So
Do you play drums as well?
yeah, well, I play percussion more than drums, more than a kit. I mean, I can keep a beat on a kit, but I haven't had a lot of experience with a kit.
So percussion being what, bongos or?
Yeah, anything you can hit and make a sound.
Well, you could do that with a human. You could hit a human and they'll make a sound.
Exactly, you cannot. Hit yourself in the mouth. And you can turn your head into an amplifier.
I don't think I've ever met a performer who didn't want to perform in front of people.
Yeah, I don't know how common that is, but that's my experience anyway. And yeah, I have no love and no interest in performing. But I do like to share my music, so I do like to record. I like the recording process because you listen to it and you fine tune it and you rehearse it and you play it back, and that whole process of making the recording, I really enjoy it. And then you've got something, and I'm happy to give that to anybody to listen to. So that to me is payoff.
You don't mind people listening to a recording of you
Right.
doing things. It's the live performance that gets you.
Yeah, because it throws me off, throws me out. I find find audiences annoying.
Are you a good concentrator? Are you able to concentrate when you're actually at work in your own quiet place?
Oh yeah, I have no problem concentrating. But like I say, with an audience, it's harder to concentrate.
Then you're distracted.
It's distracting. Yeah.
Well, I am having absolutely one of the most fascinating conversations I've had in some time with the raconteur, the great creative person, the force that he is, Jimi Fritz. And we're going to slowly wind the show down. We're almost an hour in at this point. And in all of these great, very interesting, compelling experiences you've had, are you able to share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny beyond the ones you've already told us?
Well, that's what Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer is about. It's about every weird and wonderful thing that ever happened to me, more or less. I mean, one of the problems with writing that book was what to leave out, because there was like whole countries and years that left out because you can't put everything in. It ends up being just a list of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to pick and choose the things that, like my first LSD trip and close brushes with the law and stuff like that. Gets pretty exciting.
I have a friend of mine who used to say you could fall through a barrel of corkscrews and not get scratched. That's what it sounds like.
Well, I think I've always been very lucky. I've always been very lucky because I've been in a lot of sticky situations too. And I've always just kind of sailed through. And I've always had the attitude that everything is going to work out. And it always did. And so the more it worked out, the more I believed it was going to work out. And so the more it worked out.
How important to your success do you think having that attitude has been? Is it everything?
I think it's pretty important. Yeah. I think looking back now, I think it's critical. I think your attitude is everything. You can defeat yourself in any pursuit with a negative attitude, and you can play the odds. You can get the odds a little bit more in your favor if you have a positive attitude, or if you think things are going to work out. And I always did. I always just thought everything's going to work out. Everything's going to be fine. And it always was.
That's a really good attitude to have, and also a wonderful tip. But let me ask you one more and last question for you today, Jimmy. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip beyond all those that you've given us so far that would be good or valuable for someone who's starting out in the creative life, or maybe they're in it and trying to get to the next place in that life?
I think the whole trick is to figure out who you are, and then accept who you are, and then be who you are, and then express who you are through your creative endeavors. If you do that, you'll always be happy with what you do, and you'll always be satisfied, and it'll always mean something to you.
And how important do you think that is to a creative life, that it satisfies you?
Well, for me, it's the only thing that, because I really don't care what anybody else thinks about my books or my films or my music. It's irrelevant. To me, it's irrelevant if they say, oh, I don't like that, or I do like that, whatever. It's like you can think anything you want. But for me, the only thing that matters is that I like it and I think it has value. It has value to me, and that's the whole game.
How often have you created something and didn't like it?
Well, I just keep working at it until I do like it. So very few sort of failures. I've written 3 books. There's only 3 books I've started to write, and they're the 3 books I finished writing. I haven't had any, projects that didn't really come to fruition. So I just keep going until they're done.
You have stick-to-itiveness, and you just keep banging away until you get it to where you want it. Yes?
Yeah. And that is the whole game. It's not about getting the finished product. It's about involving yourself and getting immersed in the process.
Until you're satisfied.
Yes.
You're the initial audience if you're going to have an audience.
That's right. I'm an audience of one.
An audience of one.
That's all I need.
You applaud yourself at the end of the day?
Oh, absolutely. Pat myself on the back.
Jimi Fritz, this has been a lot of fun for me, and I can't thank you really enough for your wisdom and your energy and your very compelling and interesting life. I thank you for being on StoryBeat today.
Okay, nice to talk to you. Yeah, cheers.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.